Hello, everyone. There's a secret embedded in the ancient texts, a whisper echoing through millennia, a command so potent, so omnipresent, that it almost defies belief. They say it appears exactly 365 times in the Bible, 365, one for every day of the year, the command, "Fear not." Is that just a cosmic coincidence, or is it something far more profound? A divine code, an insistent daily antidote to an ancient, relentless adversary. Tonight we plunge into the heart of this mystery, not just as a statistical anomaly, but as a battleground for the human soul, a cosmic drama where angels whisper courage against the shadows that seek to consume us. This isn't merely a theological curiosity. It is a lifeline, a roadmap through the psychological wilderness that so many of us navigate daily. Imagine, if you will, a world not so different from our own, constantly besieged by an unseen enemy. This enemy thrives on doubt, on isolation, on the gnawing uncertainty that paralyses the mightiest of kings and crushes the spirit of the purest of hearts. Its name is fear, not merely an emotion, a fleeting tremor in the soul, but a primal force, a creeping tendril, a shapeless entity that distorts reality, whispers lies, and steals hope. It feeds on our vulnerability, our anxieties, our deepest existential confusion, the subtle corrosive acid that eats away at our purpose and our peace. In the ancient narratives, this force often manifests as literal nightmares, as overwhelming armies, as the very jaws of despair, threatening to swallow entire civilizations whole. It is the silent saboteur of dreams, the architect of inaction, the grim reaper of potential. And against this formidable, ceaseless onslaught, this spiritual tyranny, there stands but one constant, one unwavering shield, one clarion call from the very fabric of existence: fear not. This isn't merely a suggestion, a gentle piece of advice for the timid. It is a divine imperative, a battle cry shouted across time and space, a spiritual mandate issued from the throne room of the Almighty. Each instance, a direct challenge to the darkness, a direct confrontation with the specter of dread. It's the voice of the divine, cutting through the static of human apprehension, a stark, powerful declaration that often heralds a monumental shift, a pivotal moment in the grand cosmic tapestry. The very angels, celestial messengers from realms beyond our comprehension, often begin their world-shattering announcements with. They know that before any miracle can unfold, before any prophecy can be fulfilled, the human heart must first be liberated from the chains of its own apprehension. They know that fear is the ultimate gatekeeper, the guardian of stagnation, the spiritual quicksand that ensnares potential. To truly step into divine purpose, one must first be commanded and empowered to fear not. Consider the patriarch, Abram, wandering through a desolate land, a stranger in a strange land, haunted by the specter of childlessness. His nomadic life was one of constant uncertainty, of raiding parties of the vast, unforgiving desert. He was a man of immense wealth, yes, but also of profound vulnerability. He had left everything behind at a divine summons, a leap into the unknown, driven by a promise that seemed increasingly impossible with each passing year. He was rich in possessions, but barren in progeny, and his heart was heavy with the weight of unfulfilled prophecy. Every caravan that passed, every encroaching tribe, every barren dawn, deepened the chasm of his apprehension. He looked to the future and saw only an airless end, his name vanishing like desert dust. The fear wasn't just for himself, but for the legacy of a divine promise, the fear of disappointing the very God who had called him. It was an existential dread, the terror of becoming a footnote in history, a failed experiment in faith. One night, a profound darkness fell upon him, a chilling premonition, a dread. He saw the smoke and the fire, the horror of a future yet unwritten, a future perhaps devoid of the lineage promised to him. The night was thick with his unspoken anxieties, the fear of leaving no heir, of his legacy dissolving into dust. It was the crushing weight of deferred hope, the slow, agonizing death of expectation. Then the voice came, a whisper cutting through the arid air, more real than the rustling sand. "Fear not, Abram," an immediate direct address. Not a question, but an affirmation, a gentle yet firm hand on his weary shoulder. "I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward." What kind of fear was this, that required a divine shield? It was the fear of the future, the fear of personal insignificance, the terror of a promise unkept by the very architect of the universe. It was the modern fear of what if, the anxiety over the unwritten chapters of our lives, the despair over our perceived inadequacies. God didn't just tell him not to be afraid. He offered himself as the ultimate protection, the ultimate reward, promising a lineage as countless as the stars in the night sky. Imagine the visceral impact of those words, slicing through the shroud of his despair. The impossible became possible, not because Abram suddenly felt brave, but because he was commanded not to fear and offered an anchor in the storm. This wasn't a sudden surge of courage from within, a self-generated burst of confidence. No, this was an external divine infusion, a courageous act of trust in the unseen, a bold step into the unknown because the divine light had pierced. It was a choice, an active defiance of the fear that sought to paralyze him, to keep him gazing at his barrenness instead of the starry host. And with that choice, a covenant was forged, a lineage began, and history itself bent to the will of a courageous, trusting heart. Abram, the anxious nomad, became Abraham, the father of nations, all because he chose to heed the divine fear not. How many grand designs, how many personal promises, how many latent potentials remain unfulfilled, because we let the specter of what if paralyze us, keeping us cowering in our metaphorical tents, rather than stepping out into the starlit expanse of divine possibility. Fast forward centuries. A people, once mighty, now languished in the iron grip of a tyrannical empire. 400 years of brutal servitude, their identity, their hope, their spirit, all had been systematically crushed under the heel of Pharaoh. Their cries of agony, their fervent prayers, seemed to dissipate into the scorching desert air, unheard, unanswered, generation after generation, born into chains, their dreams circumscribed by the whip and the taskmaster's call. The memory of freedom had become a faded myth, replaced. Then came Moses, a reluctant prophet, a man haunted by his past, burdened by a speech impediment, and utterly terrified by the magnitude of the task ahead. He had faced Pharaoh's wrath, witnessed the escalating plagues, and finally led his people out in a desperate, chaotic exodus. But the journey was far from over. Freedom, they quickly learned, came with its own terrifying behind them the thunderous chariots of Pharaoh's army, a storm of iron and rage, bore down with terrifying speed, determined to reclaim their human property. 600 chosen chariots, with all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. A living, breathing tide of steel and fury. Before them, the vast, impassable expanse of the Red Sea, a shimmering, watery grave trapped, utterly, irrevocably trapped. The mountains enclosed them, the sea blocked their path, and the relentless enemy closed in from behind. Panic, a primal, contagious wave, swept through the Israelite camp. They turned on Moses, their liberator, their leader, their scapegoat. Were there no graves in Egypt, that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Their cries were laced with bitterness, their fear palpable, a suffocating blanket of despair. They saw only death, only the inevitable end, the nightmare of their escape turning into their ultimate demise. The nightmare of slavery had been replaced by the nightmare of annihilation, a brutal final curtain call for their nascent freedom. It was the modern feeling of being overwhelmed, of circumstances piling up, of no exit strategy in sight, of the walls closing in with no apparent escape. And in that moment of ultimate dread, amidst the wails and the accusations, Moses, himself no stranger to fear, stood firm, his voice, amplified by divine authority, cut through the clamor. Fear not, stand still and see the salvation. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. Fear not. Again the command, not a suggestion to calm down, but an instruction to hold fast to witness, to trust in a power far greater than chariots or seas. It was a call to look beyond the immediate overwhelming threat and fix their gaze on the impossible. The sea parted, a miraculous highway appeared, and the impossible, the very waters that threatened to drown them, became their path to freedom, and the instrument of their enemies' demise. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological triumph, a testament to the fact that when faced with insurmountable obstacles, the divine command to fear not unlocks the pathways to miracles. It taught them that even when the world closes in, when every logical avenue is blocked, there is a way if only. The terror of the Red Sea wasn't just physical. It was an existential fear of being utterly abandoned, of God's promise being empty. Fear not was the antidote, a reminder of an ever-present, all-powerful ally who parts oceans and silences the roar of impending doom. It tells us today that when you are pushed to the brink, when all human solutions fail, that is precisely when the divine fear not becomes. The story of Gideon is perhaps the most profound exploration of this divine battle cry against inner demons, a visceral struggle between self-doubt and divine destiny. Gideon, a man of humble origins, certainly not a natural-born hero, found himself cowering in a winepress, secretly threshing wheat to hide it from the marauding Midianites. For 7 long years, these invaders had terrorized Israel, plundering their harvests, leaving them impoverished and desolate. Fear had settled over the land like a suffocating fog, robbing the people of their strength, their dignity, their very will to fight. Gideon embodied this national paralysis. He was a picture of a man consumed by self-doubt, by the inadequacy of his own strength against such. He saw himself as the weakest in his family, from the smallest clan in Manasseh. A nobody, a self-assessment rooted in the pervasive, insidious fear that whispers, "You are not enough. You are too small, too weak, too insignificant." This is the same fear that cripples so many today, preventing them from stepping into their potential, convincing them that their voice is too soft, their gifts too thin. An angel of the Lord appeared to him, not in a blaze of glory, but with an almost audacious greeting, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior Gideon, hiding in a winepress, must have scoffed internally, perhaps even outwardly. His response was a torrent of doubt, a litany of excuses, a testament to the corrosive power of fear that had eaten away at his self-worth and his faith. If the Lord is with us, and where are all his miracles? He was battling not just the Midianites, he was afraid of himself, afraid of failure, afraid of the impossible burden thrust upon him. His internal dialogue was a tempest of "I can't," a chorus of ancient anxieties. And again the divine voice cut through his anxieties. "Fear not." This command was not just external, it was directed at the very core of his self-perception. It was a challenge to the deeply ingrained narrative of inadequacy that had defined him. The angel then gave him an impossible task to save Israel from the Midianites with a paltry force. Gideon, ever the skeptic, asked for sign after sign after sign. A fleece wet, then dry. He was battling not just the Midianites, but the relentless, insidious voice of his own fear. The ultimate test came when God dramatically reduced his army from 32,000 to a mere 300 men, 300 against an army of 135,000, pure madness. Any military strategist would call it suicide. This wasn't just a strategic move. It was a psychological trial designed to strip away any reliance on human strength, to force absolute terrifying reliance on the divine. It was God's way of saying, "Let your fear." That night Gideon, still trembling, was told to go down to the camp, for I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down, go with Purah your servant to the camp, and you shall hear what they say, and afterward your hands shall be strengthened. Even in his fear, he was given an option, a divine concession to his human weakness, a pathway to overcome his inner demons. He went, he listened, he overheard a Midianite soldier recounting a dream of a barley cake, overturning their tent, a dream interpreted as God's judgment delivered by Gideon. The fear not wasn't just a command. It was a process, a gradual dismantling of his terror, replaced by an astonishing supernatural courage. He returned, heart emboldened, and with 300 men, trumpets, and empty jars with torches, he shattered the Midianite army not with swords, but with psychological warfare, with light and sound utterly routing them. The Midianites, disoriented and panicked, turned on each other in the darkness. Gideon's story is a profound narrative of how fear not can transform the most hesitant, self-doubting individual into an instrument of divine power, not by eliminating fear, but by commanding a choice against it, a leap of faith into the heart of the impossible. It illustrates that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, catalyzed by a divine decree. It's a testament that even when your inner critic screams inadequacy, the divine voice whispers a more powerful truth. Mighty warrior, fear not. It speaks directly to our modern struggles with imposter syndrome and the fear of inadequacy, urging us to recognize that our worth and strength are often found not in ourselves, but in the power that commands us to rise above. Let us turn our gaze to Daniel, a man of unwavering faith, thrust into the viper's nest of Babylonian and Persian imperial courts. He served kings, interpreted dreams, and stood as a beacon of integrity in a land of shifting loyalties and brutal power plays. His life was a constant tightrope walk between royal favor and imminent death. He defied decrees, worshipped his God openly, and faced the wrath of jealous rivals who schemed to bring him down. These rivals were driven by envy, by the fear of losing their own power, by the primal need to eliminate any who stood taller. Their fear manifested as lethal conspiracy. The most iconic instance, of course, is the lion's den. Accused of treason for his devotion, Daniel was thrown into a pit of ravenous beasts, a guaranteed gruesome end. Imagine the terror, the echoing roars that reverberated off the stone walls, the stench of raw meat, the sheer visceral dread of being in that enclosed space, utterly helpless, surrounded by predators, each one a harbinger of a violent, painful demise. The fear of 1,000 teeth, the terror of isolation in the face of certain agonizing death. Yet he slept, or at least he was found unharmed. The next morning, King Darius, filled with anguish, rushed to the den and cried out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" And Daniel, from the depths of the pit, responded with serene composure, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me." Here, the fear not wasn't explicitly spoken to Daniel in the den, but it was the profound internal posture of his heart, cultivated over a lifetime of trust, a direct outcome of God's constant reassurance throughout his life. Throughout his prophetic visions, visions of terrifying beasts and cataclysmic futures, fey empires rising and falling like waves, the very fabric of time unraveling before his eyes, fey angels often appeared to him with the words, "O Daniel, man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be to you, be strong. Yes, be strong." These heavenly visitations were not just delivering information. They were inoculating him against the psychological terror of cosmic truths, against the crushing weight of prophecies concerning empires rising and falling, against the very fear of God's immense power and the unsettling nature of the unknown future. Daniel's courage was not born of his own strength, but from a divine infusion, a repeated command to "fear not," that strengthened his resolve against earthly kings and heavenly visions alike. His story teaches us that even in the face of certain death or the overwhelming dread of unknown futures, the divine shield remains, guarding the heart that chooses not to fear. It speaks to our modern anxiety about global events, about political instability, about the daunting future, reminding us that even amidst chaos, divine purpose can prevail, and an inner peace can be found through trust. And then, a young woman in a quiet, unassuming village, her life meticulously planned according to ancient customs, suddenly finds herself at the epicenter of a cosmic bombshell, marrying a virgin devout, living a life of humble obedience. Her days were a rhythm of simple duties, her future a predictable path of marriage and family within her community, and into this serene, ordinary existence, an angel, Gabriel, descends in a blaze of glory that would surely shatter any mortal's composure. What would be your first reaction? Utter terror, perhaps confusion, a desperate plea for the sheer brilliance, the unearthly presence, the magnitude of the messenger himself would be overwhelming. And indeed, the Bible says she was troubled by his words, pondering what kind of greeting this might be. A celestial being standing before you radiating power and light. It is enough to make the sturdiest heart quake, to send shivers down the spine of the most devout, the sudden intrusion of the divine into the And what are the angel's very first words to this terrified, bewildered young woman? "Fear not, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Fear not." The universal prelude to the impossible, the angel then delivers news that would unravel her entire life, shatter her social standing, and redefine humanity's destiny, she would conceive a child by the Holy Spirit, the Son of the Most High, Jesus. Imagine the cascade of fears that must have flooded her mind: the fear of scandal, of Joseph's rejection, of public shaming, of an unknown future, of the sheer unimaginable responsibility of bearing the Son of God. These were not just personal anxieties, they were societal nightmares, existential questions about her place in the divine plan, the very fabric of her reality ripping at the seams. The whispers of the village, the judgment of her elders, the potential ostracization fey, all very real, very terrifying possibilities. Yet, after that initial, divine command, "Fear not, Mary," in an act of breathtaking courage and profound trust responds, "Behold the maidservant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." This wasn't a sudden, unthinking acceptance. It was a choice, a deliberate decision to lay aside the avalanche of legitimate fears that threatened to engulf her, and instead to embrace the divine will, however terrifying, however impossible it seemed. Her fear not was an active surrender, a brave assent that changed the course of history. It proves that the command is not a denial of fear's presence, but an empowerment to choose beyond it. Mary's story is a beautiful, intimate portrayal of how fear not is the key that unlocks divine destiny, a whispered strength against the loud clamor of human apprehension and societal judgment. It speaks to anyone facing an unexpected, life-altering challenge, a sudden shift in plans, a monumental responsibility that feels too heavy to bear. It reminds us that often our greatest calling lies just beyond our greatest fear, and that a divine fear not can equip us to say yes to the impossible. Now let us turn to a scene of primal terror, a visceral nightmare etched into the memory of fishermen. Jesus and his disciples, caught in a sudden, violent storm on the Sea of Galilee. These men were seasoned sailors, intimately familiar with the unpredictable temperament of that lake. They knew its moods, its sudden, violent shifts, but this was no ordinary squall. The waves crashed over the boat, threatening to swamp them, to drag them down into the icy depths. Death, cold and unforgiving, stared them in the face. They had left everything to follow Jesus, to witness miracles. Now it seemed their journey was about to end, swallowed by the raging tempest, their new life cut short by a furious sea. And where was Jesus? Asleep in the stern, oblivious to their mortal terror, a picture of profound peace amidst the chaos. How could he sleep? This amplified their fear, turning it into a desperate sense of abandonment. In a frenzy of fear, they roused him. "Teacher, do you not—" Their cry was not just an appeal. It was an accusation, born of utter despair, of a primal instinct to lash out when faced with imminent destruction. They saw only the wind, the waves, the imminent doom. They had forgotten, in their terror, the one who had commanded the very elements, the one who had healed the sick and cast out demons. Their fear had blinded them to the divine presence in their midst, to the very source. Their internal world was as tempestuous as the churning sea. Their faith, though present, was dwarfed by their fear. Jesus awoke, and his first words, after rebuking the wind and the sea into an immediate, profound calm, a calm so absolute it defied natural law, were directed at them, his terrified disciples. "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" This wasn't a question demanding an answer. It was a revelation of their internal state, a gentle but firm rebuke, a challenge to their perception. It implied that their fear was a choice, or at least a reaction, that could be transcended by faith. The fear not here is implied, a foundational principle they were expected to embody, a lesson they had not yet fully absorbed. The storm wasn't just external. The sea of their souls was as turbulent as the Galilee itself. He didn't just calm the external storm, he was teaching them to calm the internal one. He was showing them that even when the world rages around them, the presence of the divine means there is no true cause for ultimate fear. This event wasn't merely a demonstration of power. It was a profound lesson in existential trust, teaching them that fear not applies not just to angelic visitations, but to the everyday, terrifying realities of life and death, and that true peace comes from recognizing the power that transcends all storms. It speaks to our modern anxieties about global crises, personal setbacks, and the feeling of losing control, reminding us that even in the eye of the storm, a profound peace is possible when we acknowledge the divine presence. The ultimate confrontation with fear, perhaps, came at the empty tomb. The climax of history, yet a moment steeped in utter confusion and terror for those who first witnessed it. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary arrived at dawn, carrying spices, their hearts heavy with grief and confusion, expecting to anoint a dead body. Their journey was a mournful ritual, a final act of devotion to a shattered dream. Instead, they were met with an earthquake, a blinding light, and an angel descending from heaven. His appearance like lightning, his clothing white as snow, the very ground trembled. The guards, seasoned Roman soldiers, hardened veterans of countless skirmishes, were so terrified they became like dead men, paralyzed by supernatural dread. Imagine the sheer, overwhelming terror, a grave, robbing, and angelic visitation, the impossible notion of resurrection, Faye. It was a sensory and emotional overload. Their world, already shattered by the crucifixion, was now turned upside down. The grief they carried was replaced by a different kind of dread, a holy terror mixed with incomprehension. It was the nightmare of facing the impossible, the truly supernatural, an event that defied all logic and human understanding. And what were the angel's first words to these trembling, grief-stricken women? "Fear not, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen," as he said. Again, the divine command, this time ushering in the most revolutionary, hope-filled event in human history. It was a command to move beyond the fear of death, beyond the fear of loss, beyond the fear of the impossible. The resurrection wasn't just an event, it was the ultimate antidote to fear, the ultimate triumph over the very last enemy. It declared that even in the face of death's cold embrace, there is a power that transcends it, a promise of life that extinguishes the deepest human dread, that shatters the chains of existential terror. The fear not at the tomb was a declaration that the cosmic battle against fear had been won at its very heart. It was a beckoning to a new reality, a world where even death held no final dominion, where the gravest nightmare of all feigned. This story provides a powerful message for those grappling with grief, loss, and the fear of mortality itself, offering a profound hope that reshapes our understanding of endings and beginnings. And what about Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, a man whose life was a ceaseless odyssey of peril and suffering? Shipwrecks, beatings, imprisonment, hunger, thirst, sleepless nights, his life was a testament to enduring extreme fear, not just of physical harm, but of failing his mission, of causing spiritual shipwreck for others. He carried the burden of the churches, the constant pressure of ministry in a hostile world. He faced the wrath of empires, the skepticism of philosophers, and the raw brutality of human cruelty. His body bore the scars of his battles, his mind the weight of countless worries for the fledgling Christian communities. Every journey was a dance with death, every city a potential trap. The fear of failure, the fear of persecution, the fear of the unknown Fae, these were his constant companions. Yet again and again, in his darkest hours, the divine whisper cut through the noise of his suffering. Fear not. When facing the Jewish council in Jerusalem, amidst a violent uproar that threatened to tear him limb from limb, the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome." Later, during a terrifying storm at sea, when all hope of being saved was lost, when the ship was being violently tossed for days, when the sailors had given up, an angel of God appeared to him, declaring, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you." In these moments, the fear not wasn't a shield from the storm. It was an anchor in the storm. It wasn't a promise of an easy life, but a guarantee of divine presence through the most harrowing trials. It allowed Paul to move forward, not in the absence of danger, but with the profound assurance that even in the jaws of death, his purpose was secure, his mission divinely protected. His courage was not a self-generated bravado, but a divinely sustained fortitude, a quiet, unshakable resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. Paul's life vividly illustrates that the fear not command isn't a wishful platitude, but a powerful, empowering truth that enables believers to stare down the barrel of adversity and still proclaim hope. It's a profound psychological and spiritual strategy for navigating a world filled with genuine threats, transforming fear into fuel for an unshakable resolve, a testament to enduring suffering with an unwavering spirit. For anyone facing relentless challenges, constant pressure, or the fear of burnout, Paul's journey is a stark reminder that even in the crucible of life, a divine fear not can sustain and strengthen. So why 365 times? Is it truly just a coincidence, a random statistical occurrence in the vast compilation of biblical texts? Or is it a deliberate, intricate design, a cosmic rhythm, a constant daily whisper from the divine to our often anxious hearts? If we understand fear not as merely an emotion, but as a persistent, insidious force, a spiritual antagonist that seeks to diminish, divide, and destroy, then the answer becomes chillingly clear. Fear is not a transient visitor, it is a constant shadow, a daily challenge, a relentless enemy seeking to exploit every crack in our armor, every moment of uncertainty, every existential. It is the architect of regret, the fuel of procrastination, the silent killer of dreams. It lurks in the corners of our minds, whispers in the dead of night, and casts long shadows over our brightest aspirations. The fear not command, appearing precisely 365 times, is therefore not a coincidence. It is a divine counter, strategy. It is a daily dose of courage, a year. It is as if the divine author of existence knew, with perfect foresight, the relentless nature of this inner battle, the pervasive struggle against the shadow world of anxiety, dread, and despair. Each fear not is a lighthouse cutting through the psychological fog, a beacon of hope against the creeping darkness of modern life. The overwhelming torrent of information, the relentless uncertainty of tomorrow, the constant pressure of societal expectations, and the gnawing feeling of inadequacy. It is a cosmic alarm, reminding us of the spiritual warfare being waged for our peace of mind, and providing the think of it 365 days, 365 moments when the world or our own minds will try to convince us that hope is foolish, that safety is an illusion, that our dreams are too grand, our problems too vast, our weaknesses too pronounced. Each fear not is an invitation to step out of the shadows of our own making, to confront the nightmares of reality with a quiet, audacious trust. It challenges our contemporary struggles with anxiety disorders, depression, and the sense of powerlessness that pervades so much of modern existence. It whispers to the lonely, the lost, the overwhelmed, you are not alone. There is a greater power at work. Your story is not yet finished. Your potential is not yet exhausted. Your spirit is not yet broken. It is a divine affirmation, a cosmic. The command to fear not is not a call to recklessness, nor an encouragement to ignore real danger. Instead, it is a call to recognize the source of true security, to anchor our souls in something far more enduring than fleeting circumstances. It empowers us to discern between legitimate caution and paralyzing dread, to differentiate between wisdom and anxiety-driven decisions. It urges us to choose agency over inertia, faith over despair, and courage over surrender. It invites us to a higher vantage point where the problems of the present are seen against the backdrop of an eternal, all-powerful presence. It asks us to question the narratives that fear creates and to embrace the truth that empowers. This biblical refrain, this rhythmic pulse of divine assurance, is a profound psychological and philosophical statement, a timeless blueprint for mental and spiritual fortitude. It teaches us that our fears, however real, however potent, do not have the final say. There is a higher authority, a deeper truth, a more potent force that intervenes, strengthens, and ultimately triumphs. It tells us that the universe, in its ultimate design, is on the side of courage, on the side of hope, on the side of life. It's a spiritual weapon, a daily mantra, a divine shield against the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and inner turmoil. So, the next time the shadows lengthen, the whispers of doubt grow louder, and the specter of fear threatens to consume you, remember the 365 whispers from the heart of existence. Fear not. Let it resonate within you, a shield against the darkness, a sword against despair. Let it be your daily reminder that you are called to a courage beyond your own, to a hope that transcends circumstance, to a life lived not in the shadow of fear, but in the light of an unwavering promise. It is not a coincidence. It is a constant. It is the very essence of spiritual warfare and ultimate triumph. Choose to heed that ancient whisper, and watch as your nightmares transform into milestones of growth and your fears into foundations for unprecedented strength. Embrace the daily, fear not, and reclaim your peace, your purpose, and your power. That is all for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe, like it, and support